There is a gorgeous dogwood tree in my front yard. Each spring, the tree blossoms with impossibly pink flowers. And over the course of a few weeks, the blossoms change color, moving through a series of pinks into white. Then, as quickly as they came, the blossoms disappear. The tree moves through the summer, shooting out more and more vibrant green leaves, stretching its new branches further out to soak up every drop of sunlight. Looking out at that tree earlier today, I could see that it's already contracting, almost imperceptibly pulling back its resources from those long branches, turning toward the fall, when those leaves will yellow and droop as the tree moves into its winter dormancy. Sometimes I look at this tree just to remind myself that I am alive, and that it is alive, and that we are alive together, both part of the miracle of creation. This holiday season, we are exploring this idea of creation, what it means to think creatively and expansively, what it means to create in this world, what it means to be a creature, part of creation. And as it happens, this Jewish year, 5782, is also a sabbatical year, a biblically ordained period of attending to creation in very particular ways. The sabbatical year revolves around three basic commandments. First, that we release debtors from their debt obligations to re-equalize society. Second, that we release from bondage all Israelites who are enslaved to other Israelites. And third, that we lay fallow all agricultural lands for the whole year, only harvesting what grows without additional human intervention, and making whatever grows on our own land available to the entire community. It is an exercise of living out the possibility that there is enough for everyone's need, if not for everyone's greed. The term sabbatical year in Hebrew is Shnat Shabbaton, literally a year of Shabbat. This is what we provide for the land. The other term used for this year in the Torah is Shemitah, which means release. Release is what we can provide to our other fellow human beings. The sabbatical year is an audacious utopian vision perched on top of an even more remarkable theological proposition, that all parts of creation we can see and touch, from the land to humanity, are equally free, have equal right to rest, and cannot be permanently owned or controlled by any human. Just as humans theoretically get to experience Shabbat, so too does the very ground we walk on get to experience Shabbat. Just as humans should not be enslaved to unrelenting taskmasters, so too should the earth enjoy the freedom to rest. Rest. Shemitah, sabbatical release, is just a big picture, grand scale version of our weekly Shabbat. But even weekly Shabbat is an audacious goal and a demanding command. Shabbat commemorates two pretty radical ideas about rest. First, that rest is built into the fabric of creation. God rested, so too must we rest. Like God, we take a break from being creative in the world. We get a day to just be in the world. Second, that you know you are free because you are allowed to claim a day of rest. Shabbat is a gift of the Exodus. Shabbat tells us that working is not being. Our work is not us. If we do nothing at all, make nothing, produce nothing, we are still fully and completely worthy beings. There were many years before the masks and all of that I had an annual post-Yom Kippur tradition of visiting the Korean spa. So if you haven't been, the Korean spa is basically Disneyland for stressed out people. It's simply a series of saunas, each one with a different mood. So there's the one with clay walls, the one with wooden walls, the one with salt walls. There's even a sleeping room, which is a room where you can just lay on the ground for as long as you feel like, if you need a break from sitting. And it's amazing. I highly recommend it. I would only go once a year, and I am really looking forward to going again. I would go when I felt like I had really, really earned the right to rest my body and my mind. And invariably, after an hour or so of wandering from hot room to other hot room, from reclining position to the next, I would get restless. My mind would start to spin. What could I be doing right now? What could I be working on? I would start making lists in my head. Who do I need to call? What do I need from the store? What chores need to be done at home? And eventually, my working brain would get so much in the way that it would be time to go. In 2016, Tricia Hersey, a Southern Black theologian, preacher, and performance artist, founded the NAP Ministry. The NAP Ministry's tagline is, "Rest is resistance." Hersey spreads her message of resistant rest through blog posts with titles like, "How can you be useless to capitalism today?" Before all of this, Hersey installed sacred spaces for communal napping as a form of art and community healing. She calls sleep deprivation a racial and social justice issue. You don't have to be a spa devotee or a theologian to understand that most of us are tired. And despite the fact that we are tired, there is no rest for the weary. We are all tired of living through this, but I'm just guessing here. I think most of us were worn out before that. We were worn out by what Tricia Hersey calls grind culture. We were worn out by living in a culture of urgency. We were worn out from productivity, from work and school cultures, from worrying about money, from caring for young children or elderly parents, from caring for our own bodies as they age and change, from struggling through life in a world that wasn't built for us in so many ways, from struggling under oppressive systems, anti-Semitism, racism, ableism, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, from judgment of others and judgment of ourselves, from illness or grief, or even sometimes we've been worn out by joy. We've been worn out by this, by that, and the other thing also. So the first human life in Torah is named Ha-Adam, which we lazily translate as Adam, but which means something like the earth creature, the thing made out of Adamah, earth. As humans, we, along with all other living beings, are a part of the earth. Our bodies are made and sustained from the mineral and molecular building blocks of the earth. And eventually, we will return to it and become part of it once again. And since we are earth, we are due a sabbatical as well. Although the biblical sabbatical doesn't require humans to literally do no work for a year, it does require humans to be, like the land, freed from the control of other humans. This process of Shemitah, releasing debtors from their debt obligation, releasing those who have become enslaved by their debts, is a utopian vision. In Torah, the slate is wiped clean. Each person is supposed to be able to go back to their ancestral land holdings to start fresh. All of the material impediments holding them back from flourishing in Israelite society were almost magically to be swept away. A freed and debt-free person could simply start again on the land handed down to them. When inequality cropped up, according to the Torah, it was the result of bad weather, or maybe illness, or maybe just unfortunate choices, and the inequality was theoretically easily righted. It's hard to imagine such a simple solution to our contemporary crises of wage slavery, of housing and food insecurity. And to be totally transparent, as far as we know, the Shemitah was never perfectly observed, even in biblical times. So what would it look like to be released from the debts which hold us back? I don't just mean the monetary debts, although I can speak personally and say that would be a tremendous relief. I mean the soul debts. What would it look like to release ourselves from the sense that we owe something we can't pay, even to ourselves? What would it look like to stop striving to fulfill that debt? To stop always having the thought in the back of our minds that we should have exercised more, learned more, worked harder, made the right phone calls, showed up at the right meetings, been different people than we actually are. When have you been subjected to the phrase, "You owe it to yourself"? What today do you think you owe to yourself? And can you set that debt aside? Yom Kippur is known as the Shabbat Shabbaton, the Sabbath of Sabbath, Sabbath of Sabbaths. On Yom Kippur, we break from the daily grind, but we also rest from the very effort of keeping ourselves alive in these bodies. This is the only day in our tradition when we don't owe it to ourselves to even eat, to exercise, to wear better clothes, to groom ourselves better. On Yom Kippur, we are supposed to get a break from striving even to stay embodied. We can't do it for much more than a day. Striving to live is encoded in our DNA. It is a biological imperative. When our minds and bodies stop striving to live, it is a medical or psychiatric emergency. But for just a day, what a revelation. This is what happens when we stop. For just a moment of spaciousness, for just a moment free from striving. What would it look like to bring this sense of spaciousness, this break from striving, to every single day of this year of release? What would it look like if we weren't tired, if we weren't terrified of giving ourselves a rest? What would it look like if we weren't tired? I don't know what that would look like. What would it look like to fully give ourselves over in openness to the possibility that we don't have to constantly create, produce, earn more, or fix in order to be worthy, in order to be enough? What if, like the trees outside, we allowed ourselves to play with the idea of dormancy, just to play with it? It's a common misunderstanding that dormant plants are not accomplishing anything. In fact, dormancy requires a clever reorganization of internal resources as cells fill up with minerals and hormones which prevent the water inside from freezing and destroying the cell. Dormancy requires making the choice to shut off productivity, even though it means the tree won't be able to gather any more energy during the long winter. Dormancy means redirecting attention and resources inward rather than outward, building up the self even when it looks like nothing is happening on the outside. Shabbat only exists in relationship to the 6 days of the work week. Yom Kippur only exists in relationship to the bulk of our lives, where we are out in the world striving and failing over and over. And the Shemitah year only exists in relationship to 6 years of tending our real and metaphorical fields. We are not invited to be dormant forever, but we are invited by this year to accept with humility the possibility that there are tasks we cannot finish, problems we cannot personally solve, productivity that cannot be forced from the earth without end. The trees know when there is energy to spare, when to send out new shoots, and they know when it is time to pull in their resources, to abandon the project of constant growth, to build up another layer of protective bark. This is the day, and this is the exact service where we ask God to release us from our debts. And with the words of Kol Nidre, which we sang earlier, we absolve ourselves as a community of our spiritual debts to the future. As we move through this day of release, within this year of release, may we have the discernment to ask what we can release for good and what we can release for right now. May we have the wisdom to differentiate between the striving that destabilizes and destroys us and the striving that gives us strength to be who we were meant to be. Gemar Chatima Tova.